We're in the midst of a huge transformation where our peers, communities, and workplaces are all really melding into one. Welcome to Reimagining Company Culture. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. Today, I am super excited to welcome our next guest onto the interview series, Michele Bousquet. She is the Chief People Officer at Strava. Michele, thank you so much for being here. If you want to share a little bit about yourself for our listeners, including your pronouns, and when you were younger, do you remember how you answered the question, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yep. Yes, very nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Michele Bousquet, and I use the pronouns she and her, and have been the Chief People Officer at Strava since December 2019, so a little over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
When I was young, I actually had no idea I wouldn't have known what my current job is. I didn't have language for that. When I was young, I wanted to be a doctor. I've always been very much drawn to situations that involve care and helping people and supporting people. And so I was I had dreams of being a doctor and kind of being there for people and saving them. So.
I love it. I love it. You fast forward to today, and how do you think your kind of personal journey has really led you to be specifically at Strava and kind of be that people leader as a CPO?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny even saying like I've been drawn to caring for people, and that's very much the kind of the heart of how I would define my job is what do people need? How can I help support their needs? But my road has been very winding. Obviously, I did not become a doctor. I didn't go to medical school. I ended up being an English major, and I will say I had like a real aversion to corporate America. I once swore I would never work in corporate America. And that was like 6 days before taking a temp job at a financial services company. And I realized I needed to pay the bills. But my career has really been defined by follow the next right thing. So do your best, doors open, make yourself kind of essential and seek to understand and do your best, do your best, do your best. And then this just series of like doors open and, oh, this must be the next right thing. And so it's a no regrets career. I spent time in architectural engineering when that was the next right thing. I spent time as an executive assistant when that was the next right thing. And ultimately, I would say I had a turning point. I had joined a company and as an executive assistant, I had the opportunity to become a chief of staff, and I had the opportunity then to actually progress and join the management team and lead the people team and really spend almost 10 years at a company building out a nice career arc. And I think I always wrestled with that. Well, like corporate America doesn't have a sense of meaning. Being a doctor would have had a sense of meaning, or being on the front line somewhere would have had meaning. And the turning point was in recognizing that I happened to be in this seat. I happen to interact with many, many, many people all day, every day. And there's an opportunity, like it's all people and people need care, and you can be a force for good. And you can be there for people and you can be meaningful in their lives through work. And I think from that point, seeing like, wow, I'm actually in a position to do a tremendous amount of good in people's actual lives. Then I sort of embraced where I was and saw it as like, oh, actually, this is my life's work.
I love that. I think caring for people is really important. We spend a lot of our time working as well. So really investing in folks, people can tell when you're being genuine and really kind of actively listening as well. And when we're answering the question, what do people need? Everybody is different. They're at different parts of their lives, different parts of their career. And I read that you love to create these people first cultures, which is really great too. How do you define what that actually looks like in practice? And how do you stay true to that at scale when people are joining the team all of the time?
Yeah, it gets more complicated. But I think it's possible. And I will say Strava is genuinely a people first culture. And that's not because I built that. It's from its founding sort of DNA. It is a company that appreciates people. And so I would say people first starts with an appreciation that your entire business hinges on the people who have made the choice to give their services to you. Um, if you miss that, even in your kind of fundamental underlying assumption, you're probably going to, I'll say, get a little too over your skis and lack the humility required to like keep that balance constantly in check. So that doesn't mean, like we do whatever people want and they always get to call the shots, but it means you appreciate that people are doing you an active service when they could go many places. and they're choosing to bring their talents to you. And so understanding that each person is a human being with a full life and a different lived experience, and a whole life outside of this work, like how can we take those two like beliefs or understandings? One, our company hinges on you people, and two, each of you is an individual human being with like a wide set of needs. Then when we make decisions, we consider like, how will this impact people? What do people need? As I say, how might we meet people's needs? And is there a way that we can do it? I start with like, we'll get this like, people need XYZ, and our knee-jerk reaction is like, well, it's not in the budget. And I think at Strava, and this is like the how do you build that, you
Mhm.
start with like, well, what can we do? Like, what is reasonable? And there's just an inherent flexibility that comes with that, because people are different and people have different needs. So building in that like thoughtful consideration, how might we meet their needs? You can find a middle ground, but it really does start with those first two assumptions of like, we have no business without these folks. We're lucky to have them.
Yeah.
Uh, and each one of them is an individual whole human being.
I like thinking about it for that service as well, and an active choice to be doing this work, being around these folks as well, and understanding the full kind of life of someone inside and outside of work or these Zoom boxes too, because it impacts how we show up on a day-to-day basis. And I think that over the past 2 years, that's a major change that we've seen, especially in these conversations of talking about that as well, and how organizations are showing up to support people in great times, celebrating their work, and also in really hard conversations, and really showing up and supporting folks too. We know that about 2 years ago, Strava made a commitment to being an anti-racist company, like some other organizations, which is incredible. Could you talk to me a little bit more about that commitment?
Absolutely. So I want to make it clear that Strava was not an anti-racist company in any stretch of the imagination before we made that commitment. We made that commitment following George Floyd's murder and everything that had led up to it. And we actually incorporated anti-racism into our company values over time as well, to continue to make this not something that's on the side or like a project that we'll pick up for a little while, but through and true to who we are kind of at every level of how we operate this company. So I'd say it's been a journey, and we see that as we set the aspiration of becoming an anti-racist company. We will never refer to ourselves as an anti-racist company, which I think would be a myth, right? Like our belief and our understanding of anti-racism, that it's actually on any given day, a behavior or policy or an approach can further anti-racism or can further traditional racist or race-based practices. And so how do we continue to establish more and more norms, more and more disruption of those white standards over time, and really like rethink, I think eyes wide open, can we pause and reflect on like how privilege led to a situation or a way that we do things, how a white standard is the norm, and how that impacts the way we view certain people or the styles that they bring to the workplace. And so we've restacked so many things, but we are just on our journey. We've reevaluated and really redone the entire way we hire. We've sought, just tremendous kind of change within the company, and we're just on our journey. And some things have worked, and some things, frankly, haven't worked at all. But keeping anti-racism and our vision of becoming an anti-racist company at the center of our conversations at the management team, as the bar that we hold ourselves to, has allowed us to improve over time. And we're still working on it.
I think that's so important in terms of accountability. And I definitely agree with you in terms of, making a commitment to be an anti-racist organization is not a destination that you one day just, arrive at and then you're done working on it as well. You need to test things. You need to have these open conversations, and really intentionally set up people for success as well, looking at systemic and historical context, and also, again, having these conversations too. And I think that along the lines of something that is intentionally worked on when we're talking about making sure people feel like they belong at a company, that they can do their best work, that they're heard, we're talking about that company culture, that people first culture that you mentioned was a kind of a grassroots effort, and also intentional from your end as a leader. How do you think about kind of measuring company culture from a qualitative and quantitative sense, and thinking about kind of progress there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think about it from like maybe simply, I think at the top order, the highest order is people vote with their employment decisions. So at the very highest order in this competitive market, people leave your company because we have very talented teammates who are getting, reached out to every day. So the first order signal is, what does your attrition look like for your ability to retain your team? So we certainly have an eye on that. And but we do conduct quarterly engagement surveys with anonymous feedback. And what we do there, first monitor kind of top level, we call them like temperature checks. How are we trending? When we ask people things like, I still see myself here in 2 years' time. I feel like I belong. I feel like I'm, in a position to succeed. And so we look at that, but we also, I think the biggest value is we have a couple of like, I won't say forced, but mandatory writing questions on those that are more general. We read every single word and we look for trends and we look for like, what's the brewing thing? What's the growing thing? What about the way someone's writing that? Like, what might we understand underneath? And so really honing through and looking at those survey and feedback results. And then lastly, it's our people team's ability and our manager's ability to, like, we prioritize at Strava spending time with people one-on-one and hearing how they're doing. So taking all of that input and feedback and bubbling things up helps us monitor the health of our culture. And then also, even just in our performance review process, the very first question we ask is, overall, how are you doing? And people take that in a number of directions, but we read all of that and we understand how people are doing. And so I think all of those things together stitch our sense of, how's it going? Are we healthy? And where are those opportunities to continue to improve? We try to remind ourselves, it's not about like getting an A and being like, yes, we have a great culture. A culture is a living and breathing thing informed by the people within the culture. And so naturally it will be always changing. And it's just about how can we learn and improve.
Absolutely. Culture is definitely something that is dynamic. It's not static. And if you want to, know how people are feeling, you have to ask them, and you have to ask them with really thoughtful questions at different times throughout their employee experience with the team as well. I was familiar with Strava on the consumer end as well. I download and re-download the app, and I am trying to get myself to run and invest in my physical and mental well-being too. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, how are you intentionally investing in the mental and physical well-being of your team at Strava?
Yeah, absolutely. And Strava, we have the privilege of working on an app that is wholly geared toward helping people be active. The basis of Strava is people keep people active, right? Like, so the ability to go out and do a run or a ride or a walk and like have your friends give you a thumbs up and encourage you. And it's just this beautiful cycle of like, oh, I see what I can do. And like, it's motivating. So it is the core of the company. One of our values is balance. And kind of subtext is, there's always time for a workout and there's always time for family. That is so true to Strava. We are known for the like midday, go out, disconnect, go for a walk, go for a run. It's celebrated, it's encouraged. There's no shadow on it at all of like side eye. Why were you, so that is a huge part of well-being, is physical movement and activity. But otherwise, we've also introduced different things, different benefit offerings. We recently joined up with Modern Health so that we could provide one-on-one therapy for employees, as well as coaching and the variety of services that they provide, but tailored solutions to say, like, what else? We have really good medical benefits, but what else can we offer? We offer free subscriptions to mindfulness apps. We host and support employee resource groups, which are a huge part of mental health. And we also, like, a regular practice at Strava is what we call holding space. So when critical events happen in the world, or it can just, even the verdicts delivered in the Ahmaud Arbery trial this week warrant a note from our CEO and a reminder for people to take the time and space they need to process these things, understanding that they impact us all on many different levels. And so that's a part of mental health too, is saying like, hey, if people come first, people need like space and flexibility to deal with things in a different way.
Absolutely. I think holding space is so important as well, and goes to your earlier point of people have things that they are thinking about, responsibilities, kind of roles they have outside of work, and that kind of affects how they are doing their work and are in conversations and in meetings. And it's really important that they feel like they have that support of their leaders and of the company that they are working with too. I know you gave like a couple examples of just like how you're thinking about supporting the full well-being of Strava team members, which is great too in terms of feedback and thinking about innovation in the people space over the past 2 years. Can you tell me about how you've redesigned a system or process to be more equitable?
Yeah. I think, again, we try to get out of this like mindset of like, we delivered a great, perfect program. Like all of our programs, I would put like draft under them. Strava is the classic, most tech companies, you have to be able to build the plane while flying it. And so when I say redesigned, we're always redesigning. I can talk to you about our performance management process, which I think a few years ago was a big, heavy, once a year, big old behemoth review. And then it was like a kind of maybe more mild version of that mid-year. What we have done over time is evolve into more of like an ongoing kind of normalized performance cycle. We do quarterly check-ins, we call them. We have, and again, it always starts with how are you doing? We try to keep them light. It's just a self-reflection of like kind of what's going well, what's not going as well. Try to keep it personable, actionable, conversational. But when we think about making it more equitable too, the reality is there's so much bias in like who is ready for promotion, who is, who's being considered as a top performer versus less, less so. So we do things like, first of all, analyze all of the demographics of the data. We would expect, right, that we would have people in performance categories that match the demographics of the company. And when there's over or under in either, whether that's by gender, by race, like taking a look at that, pushing to the next level, asking. But we also, in every manager review or check-in, it says, is this person ready for promotion today? And there's a process of like, I need to think through, are they ready for promotion today? And just the act of asking and forcing at least you thought about it. And there's also a like, I'm not sure and I need help from the people team, opens up an avenue for us to support people. So, and then I think lastly, like we always filter by who hasn't been promoted in 2 years. What is that person's individual situation? Do we understand why that is? And so there's structural kind of within the process ways that we're striving toward equity. There's a load that the people team is taking that creates a feedback loop that we think is valuable for our senior leaders. We calibrate across the organization. And so just feel like we're like catching a lot more, catching people up, catching like a lot more of the context and doing a better job in general than we were in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating a clear framework for success, expectations, asking really thoughtful questions as well. So nobody is surprised. And also kind of investing in those resources too, to be like, how are we thinking about interrupting bias and really making it a systemic change? So I think performance management is a really, really good example there as well. In terms
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like listening and all of the things that you're doing at Strava too, I think another really important piece of company kind of culture as a living, breathing kind of thing is that building that trust as well. And some organizations say that they have an open door policy, but for whatever reason, if people didn't have a great experience in the past, giving their positive, negative, anything in between feedback, or they just don't feel comfortable doing so. What are the methods you use to like really build trust within your organization and encourage folks to come to you or anyone on the people team to surface positive feedback and also perhaps concerns?
Yeah, this is something that we're thinking a lot about, and it is, I'll say, kind of a tough nut to crack. Um, this has also been a really big personal learning for me as well, because I think for the most part, I've always had this like, hey, it's just me, come and talk to me. And I recognize as a leader, there's no way to shed your role. There's no way to be just Michele. I'm Michele, the chief people officer at Strava. So when people like the bar for someone setting up time with me is like, I'm taking like head of HR and like telling them something. And I realize like, I think the learning is I used to think like, why? Well, just tell me. It's no big deal. I'm so approachable. And not being conscious of like the power dynamics that impact people's feeling of safety and security. And that only some people will feel like emboldened and comfortable enough, whether given their leadership level or their experience with these types of things, to actually come and give it to me. So whereas I used to naively think I know what's going on and what's on people's minds, I know that I don't. And I know that I only know a fraction. So all to say, like we do rely on our engagement surveys and what people are telling us. We also we have anonymous ways to ask a question, and we provide those inroads. And And also, I think recognizing there are certain trusted people throughout the organization that people do go to. And so like normalizing that, like, you will let me know like where I can help or what's going on. And but we are, we're actually introducing a set of company-wide norms around anti-racism next week to our full team. And some of this just plays into the, like, we know we need, in order to become further along in our anti-racism journey, we need more continuous anonymous feedback loops. So it's something that we're very, very conscious of. I think, how do we build trust and accountability? And then maybe most importantly is like, when we do learn that someone was harmed, what do we do with that? And how do we work to repair the harm and acknowledge it?
Mhm.
We're building a track record of that hopefully is like the foundation of, this is a trusted process. We do have your back. But I'd say it's tricky. It's something we're deliberately like thinking about and working on constantly. And we know we need to do better because we probably only have a fraction of the information today.
Yeah, I think that intentionality is so important in building trust. Like any other relationship in life, it takes time. It takes a lot of different examples, and then that action piece as well. When you have that trust, what are you doing with that information and showing that you heard that person too? In the different avenues that you shared, whether someone's coming to you one on one or someone provided feedback in the other ways that are available. Can you share any other examples of how employee feedback has really informed change in policies or strategies at Strava recently?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of so many ways, but I'll say one just kind of practical solution was just we got kind of a mountain of feedback about people were really struggling. Like in May, June last year, it's been more than a year into the pandemic. I think we got kind of a crescendo of like, this isn't working. Like our pace, our like growing startup, and my exhaustion and burnout and lack of work-life balance, and just like to a troubling level. And so again, with our like, take a vacation, we have unlimited time off, like our encouragement was not actually helping. There was still this feeling that people couldn't step away. And so what we did was actually like structurally, we created a program and set individual expectations that each person was going to take a meaningful break. We called it, we made it like a campaign and a program and a thing that over 90% of our employees ended up utilizing. But it was like almost like a forced like 3-week vacation, or you could take 3 2-week vacations in a 6-month period, or every Friday off. Or we worked like with each person to create a tailored solution for like, what do you need? Starting with like, what do people need? And can we do that? And so a program like that, whereas like, wow, that was a lot for the business to take and absorb. And it certainly slowed down some of our deliverables, but thinking like, we always try to play the long game. Like if everybody's burnt out and sad and unproductive or needs to leave, like, then where are we? So then actually we have to figure out a way to support people to a different degree. And that did start with feedback that we received. So
That's awesome. I think that the gift of time is really important, and also listening to that feedback and building a really sustainable kind of approach to answering those questions, and the kind of feedback that people gave is important as well. It sounds like there's a multitude of ways that Strava and you and the team are kind of building inclusivity also into the culture too, because it isn't kind of a siloed strategy. It affects all parts of the business. How are you kind of meeting people where they are? For folks listening and they're thinking, I want to also build an organization like Strava that is really an anti-racist organization. That's something we're working towards, and they want to be really inclusive. How would you define an inclusive culture at Strava, and what advice would you have for folks to take steps to build one themselves?
yeah, I think I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I deliberately was like, I'm going to answer with kind of how I see it then, because it's a really complicated question.
Yeah.
At the heart of it to me is like, you've assembled a group of people at Strava, about a little over 350 people. And can you understand that like each one of them is a whole human being? And does each one of them feel like, I am accepted here, I am able to do my work here in a way that I feel supported, I can be myself, and that means I can express myself, whether it's how I look, how I, the things that I say, the style that I use, is there a lane for me here? And so, we talk a lot about, inclusivity going hand in hand with belonging, right? We can create this culture of inclusion, we can celebrate, but at the individual level, do people feel like I can belong here? I don't have to be best friends with everyone, right? Companies aren't summer camps, and but it's, can I do my work? Can I actually leave this place better? And so how to take some initial steps. I think the most basic practice is, like when we introduce ourselves, we share our pronouns, because it normalizes that someone may not be using, binary pronouns, and it makes them, like, lifts the burden of, now I have to explain to you. It's like, oh, here's a lane and I can just step right in there. That's a really micro behavior, but one that we've learned and that has been useful. We do things like we have an all hands every week, and every 2 weeks we have new hire cohorts join. So we always introduce the new hires at the all hands, and there's a different host of all hands, by the way. Every week we asked a different employee from any level to be the host of all hands. And so that person is tasked with introducing the new hires and saying something about each one. We are in the practice of, if they did that and they mispronounced someone's name, at the end of, like, we're messaging them, and at the end we say, hey, it's important to us that part of inclusion is getting people's names right. And so we want to correct that it wasn't this, it was actually welcome, so-and-so. And I think it's just those, like, micro habits that are like, I see you. When we do harm, we're willing to repair it publicly. It's also light, and, like, it normalizes. It doesn't have to be really scary.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, it starts with, like, who are you? You have an interesting, like, background and experience, and we want to hear about that. And here are some support communities you can find at Strava. But if you don't have one here that resonates, start your own and we'll fund you. And here, just some of those practices to be like, and then we use words often about, this is an evolving culture. Our culture will be what it is because of you individually. And you'll have a mark here, and, like, how can we support you in that?
I love those examples, because those are things that anyone across the company can take steps to implement in their kind of day-to-day tomorrow as well. And I think that a lot of the work around inclusion starts with that self-work, kind of to your point as well, acknowledging, and then kind of, creating those norms too, as well. And I think that says a lot from leadership as well, modeling that behavior. For March 2022, I definitely want to acknowledge that it is Women's History Month, and International Women's Day is, I believe, the second week of March as well. How is Strava celebrating and honoring this year, recognizing that I'm sure you're supporting women 365 days a year, but always like to ask for March.
Yeah. So I think it's, to be honest, we're right in the middle of our Black History Month celebration. And so we will turn our attention toward women's history next month. But we have the benefit of a really strong group, ERG, called the Roundtable, which used to be the Women's Roundtable. Last year, we changed it to be the Roundtable to represent women and historically underrepresented genders. And it's a very robust group that meets once a month. With all just a vibrant, like, discussion. It's about professional development. It's about learning from others, sharing our stories, et cetera. And so next week, we're having an all company meeting in San Diego, where we're going to be able to meet, like, so many of the colleagues that have joined during the pandemic and spend a week together. And part of that will be gathering the roundtable and talking about how we want to celebrate and be together, and taking the spirit of this, like, energy and vibrancy that exists within that group and shining it outward. So more to come, but
It's exciting. I love that. I think that that in-person connection and just meeting new team members, or team members who joined during these past couple of years will be a really exciting time. Michele, we've talked a lot about your personal journey to this work. It's really clear that you are a really caring individual, and I appreciate all of the kind of strategies you shared as well for folks as kind of best practices to take with them. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to share, or maybe underscoring one or two key takeaways from our conversation today?
yeah, I mean, there's so many things. I will say, like, wherever you are, you can start there. I sit in a very privileged position of working for a CEO who deeply, deeply cares about people. And the way that I am supported in, like, embodying the values of the company through our people approaches and culture, like, I wouldn't be able to do that without the partnership with Michael Horvath and the rest of our exec team. So I understand and recognize that. If you're listening to this, you might be thinking, like, we don't, I always have to, like, package what I want to do and sell it to the team. And so I would just say, take heart, like, wherever you are, there are steps you can take, just the littlest thing, like correcting people's names, like asking, when I interview people, I ask like, what should I know about you? And I always see them like lighten and brighten, because it's like, oh, me, like me, the human.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just like, there's just micro habits that can be meaningful. And then I think like at the end of the day, um, I don't know, just appreciating that there's a lot of meaning here. Like whatever your role is, whatever your level is, you're interacting with people, you can make a tremendous impact on them that is lasting well beyond your tenure together. And that's just, to me, that creating that sense of meaning is actually the why. And there's good work to do here within companies. So thank you for having me and allowing me to share some of our journey and perspective from Strava.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you that the micro habits also make a big macro impact for the folks around you and also the people that will join in the future as well. Michele, thank you so much for being on Reimagining Company Culture this afternoon. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Take care.
Of course, and as a reminder for folks who are listening at AllVoices, we believe in employee feedback management as a requirement for the organization to succeed overall. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.